Hello students, welcome to the Recitals in-Depth. Herein, we will cover the international relations June 2024 current affairs topics in detail. The broader themes which we are going to cover are as follows: elections in important nations, dispute in West Asia, environmental governance, maritime security, issues related to neighborhood nations, resources in Central Asian region, immigration-related news, Indian diaspora, and important reports. Welcome students. So the first issue, Pakistan and China agreed to upgrade CPEC, that is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Recently in June, Prime Minister of Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif, visited China so that the phase 2 of the CPEC project could be upgraded. They are expecting to advance the high-quality infrastructure-related projects in this region. So let us have a look about this issue. Now to understand what CPEC is, we will have to look at the map. So CPEC is located in this region of Pakistan. So it is expected to connect Kashmir city in Xinjiang province of China to the ports in Pakistan, that is Gwadar and Karachi. Now this CPEC project was signed in April 2015, and since then the phase 1 of the project started. Another phase started in 2022. Right? So initially, when the agreement was signed, it was decided that there would be an investment by the Chinese nationals up to the order of $46 billion. But slowly, due to various circumstances and need of the hour, it has increased to $62 billion. Now, the phase 1 was agreed to have infrastructure creation. So mainly energy security, infrastructure development, port developments, and railway construction lines were expected to be finished within the phase 1. However, the progress was very patchy. Only 14 out of 21 projects were finished which were related to energy related security. Secondly, only 6 out of 24 projects were completed when it came to transport related projects. So the progress has not been as smooth. Also, the investment was only up to the order of $22 billion. So, in 2022, they went for phase 2 of the project, in which they decided, let us have industrial cooperation agreement. Now, within this agreement, it was decided that there would be special economic zone constructed within the areas of this port, that is Gwadar and Karachi port. Also, there was a proposal that we have industrial sectors along the route so that Pakistan's economy also improves. The goals of these phases has been twofold. One is to boost Pakistan's economy, and the second is to create a trade route which would connect the overland routes from Kashmir onwards to the deep sea ports so that maritime trade routes and the overland trade routes are connected. So this is about the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. However, this project, it has taken so long and there were reasons why it was stalled. So both the countries have certain issues. One is with respect to Pakistan. Now Pakistan has this region, Balochistan, located near the Gwadar port. This region has a number of separatist elements, and these pose a threat to the security of the project. Another thing is that Baloch people have called the Gwadar port and this project as a gross economic injustice. Why? This is because it has not created the employment that it was supposed to. Also, there is no quality jobs for the youth. Therefore, they also feel that there is no economic growth for the people residing in this region. So this is related to Pakistan. With respect to China, a number of Chinese companies have come and gotten involved into the China CPEC project. However, they have brought their own nationals for the labor work. That is, they are not employing the local population there. Therefore, while it was said that nearly 2 million jobs would be created out of this project, it was estimated that it would be creating 2 million jobs. However, it has just gone up till 250k. Only these number of jobs have been created, right? Secondly, these Chinese nationals also face a big amount of security threat. This is from the people who are involved with this separatist elements. And since 2018, a number of Chinese nationals have been killed by the elements of separatism, right? So this is the reason why the CPEC project was stalled. Now, what are the concerns of India with respect to CPEC? So the first thing is, CPEC follows this route, and within this route lies this region, that is Gilgit-Baltistan region. Now this region is something claimed, this region is claimed by India, and India calls it Pakistan occupied Kashmir. This was the reason that CPEC creates a sovereignty and territorial integrity threat to India, right? So Gilgit-Baltistan region, which passes through the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Another reason is there is a huge amount of security threat. Why? One is there is continuous presence of Chinese military to guard these projects. So this would pose a threat and also create an issue of surveillance within these areas. Secondly, China is all-weather ally of Pakistan. China herself calls it a all-weather ally of Pakistan, which means that come what may, there may not be a solution with respect to this CPEC project and they may not withdraw, right? Third thing is, there is a hypothesis which is given the name of string of pearls. Now this hypothesis says that Chinese are interested in constructing ports and commercial operations within the ports of various other nations, so that the choke points like some of the states, suppose say states of Hormuz, Mandeb, Malacca, these are secured. And also, this is the second international naval base of China. That is, Gwadar is the second one. So what China is trying to do is it is trying to encircle the dots or the ports across the Indian subcontinent. So one was Djibouti in Horn of Africa. The second naval base is here in Gwadar, right? And also we know from our previous classes that Hambantota was also there in Sri Lanka and so on. So this process of encircling India through this string of pearls strategy may just be true. However, the concerns are not just about India. Even Pakistan is concerned here. And why? Because China has given it a lot of debt. Pakistan is ridden with debt, and 80% of its bilateral debt servicing goes to China. Not only this, the debt, external debt of Pakistan has increased from $4 billion to $30 billion in 2024. It was just $4 billion in 2013, right? So it is a kind of a debt trap that is being created by the Chinese. The IMF, while they have removed Pakistan out of the FATF grey list, but they have said, okay, we will provide you with a bailout package. However, this debt servicing should not go to the Chinese, right? There should not be positive outflow of this money that is given out to you through a bailout package. It should not go towards the Chinese investments, right? So Pakistan has to accept these conditions so that its debt is serviced. And this would lead to debt dependency of Pakistan. It may also lead to unsustainable debt and finally some form of neo-colonialism like we had in the British era. And this would ultimately make it a client state of China. So the concerns are with respect to both the neighboring nations, both India and Pakistan. Pakistan wants to avoid its debt trap, and India wants to secure its sovereignty and integrity and also secure its borders with respect to the Chinese military. So this is the issue with respect to the CPEC project. Mexico elects Claudia Sheinbaum as first female president. Now, Mexico has elected its first ever female president. And this is quite significant because it has not happened in the last 200 years. So let us have a look at what this election was all about. To start with, June was a month of elections for India as well as Mexico. And they had certain similarities. The leaders who were contesting the elections were quite popular. And the popular leader within the Mexico country was AMLO, that is Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, who is popularly known as AMLO, and he belongs to the party Morena. Now, in Mexico, there is a restriction that if you have served one term as the president, then you cannot serve the second term, right? Every term is of 6 years. With respect to Indian elections, this was the third term that Prime Minister Modi has won. And in both these countries, the Popular Party has won. There, Morena Party has won, and here the BJP Party has won. And PM Modi has been reinstated, while there, the candidate that has been elected is Claudia Sheinbaum. So this is the first thing. Let us understand why is this win significant. The first reason is she is the first female president. Now, Mexico is a country where there is a lot of macho culture. That is, they push forward the traditional roles that have been held by women. Also, there is a lot of violence against the women. And this election is a testimonial to the fact that they are slowly turning towards progressive views and also respecting the rights of women. And since this has happened only 200 years after, it makes it all the more significant. Then there is a landslide victory, that is Morena party has won nearly 58% votes. The other contestant was also female, so it was an eventuality that only a female president would be elected. That was already celebrated. However, 58% votes means that it has never happened in the democratic history of Mexico. So it makes this win a lot more significant. However, there was one drawback, and it has created a lot of issue. That is, these were also the most violent elections. Why? Nearly 38 candidates who were contesting elections were killed in this process. So this raises a serious question on the security that is provided in Mexico. Another significance was that they have established a cabinet of technocrats. The president herself, Claudia Sheinbaum, is a climate scientist. And the rest of the cabinet members are also experts in their academic fields. So this also points to the progressive view that is about to come in Mexico. Now, what are some of the things that are positive for Mexico with respect to these elections? First thing would be the political aspect. So, since this time Mexico has a super majority, it would be easier to push constitutional reforms. It would be easier for them to improve institutional quality, and also they would be passing the budgets and allocating it to the respective sectors easily. So this supermajority would be something positive in the upcoming times for Mexico. The second thing is the president-elect would also inherit her predecessor's social welfare work that was done. One was, there was huge reduction in poverty, or rather multidimensional poverty. Multidimensional poverty would deal with health, education, income. All of these things are catered to within this kind of poverty. So the statistics say that in 2015-14, nearly 46% people were poor or below poverty line. Come 2024, it has reduced to just 36%. Right? Then there is reduction in unemployment rate. So it is the lowest ever in the history of Mexico, and it stands at 2.6%. There was a constant push by the previous government, that is by AMLO, to increase the minimum wages for the laborers. This was doubled during the last term, right? So this is again a positive for Mexico, so that it can also build upon what has been achieved. Economic aspect. Now, with respect to Mexico, inflation is converging. That is, the general price of goods and services is reducing on the whole. So it is becoming much more affordable for the common man to buy the necessary objects. One more thing is, there has been strengthening of the currency of Mexico, that is, peso has strengthened. So this makes the trade with respect to other nations much more competitive in nature. So these are the positives for Mexico. What are the challenges now? There are, of course, a lot many challenges that Mexico faces and that needs to be sorted out by the president-elect. So let us see one fiscal deficit. This amounts to 5% of GDP. This is the highest that it has ever been in the last 3 decades, right? And also, there's a huge amount of debt that the government has to pay back. And the debt upon GDP ratio is 49%, right? So this is mainly on the back of rising social spending and high investment costs due to a lot of priority projects that were to be completed within time. And this has also led to the low economic growth for Mexico, right? A lot of things have to be invested first. You have to have capital investment and then it will give you returns in the future. So one of the reasons for low economic growth is that investments have been done, but the output is yet to be received. Then there is organized crime. Drug trafficking is a major issue here. And this is also threatening the neighboring nations, as is illegal immigration that it faces from its neighboring nation, America. Right? So these are the challenges, broad challenges that Mexico at present faces. Now, let us also have a look at the bilateral relations between India and Mexico. So, with respect to diplomatic relations, Mexico was the first Latin American country to recognize and establish diplomatic relations with India once it got its independence. So, it was the first Latin American country. Right? Then there is economic and commercial relations. One would be with respect to trade, and the other would be with respect to green revolution. Right? So with respect to trade, there is almost a trade balance that has been achieved, while with respect to India exports close to $5 billion worth of goods and services. A huge amount of it is the pharma products, pharmaceuticals. While Mexico exports 4 billion worth of goods and services, and major part of this export basket from Mexico is crude oil. Right? So there is almost a trade balance that is created. There is a trade surplus with respect to India of $1 billion. Right? And then there were wheat hybrids that were created out of the sample of India and Mexico wheat. And this caused the backbone of Green Revolution during the 1960s. Right? With respect to groupings, Mexico supports India's membership to the Nuclear Suppliers Group. Earlier it did not, but post the visit of Prime Minister in 2016 to Mexico, it has changed its stance. However, there is also one opposition. You must have heard about United for Consensus or the Coffee Club. Mexico is a part of this club and it opposes the membership of UNSC for India as a permanent member. And this is being contested in the global diplomatic levels by the group of four. The group of four being Brazil, India, Japan, and Germany. Right? So going forward, with respect to this new elections in both the countries, it is expected that they would tread into the path of trade and other commercial relations. There has been $9 billion which has been invested in trade by both the countries. And this is much more than what India trades with Nepal or what Mexico trades with Canada or Spain. So this was related to the India and Mexico relations. Iran summons Chinese envoy over disputed Gulf islands. Now, there is a dispute between Iran and United Arab Emirates. Okay, so what are the contested regions? One is Lesser Tun, Greater Tun, and Abu Musa. So these are the territorial regions that are occupied by Iran. However, these are claimed by United Arab Emirates. In the latest times, we have seen that China is a close ally of Iran. There has been trade relations, there has been strategic partnerships. However, China's stance with respect to these territorial disputes, in it, China has sided with UAE. So what would be the reasons for it doing so? Here you should also see that it is Strait of Hormuz, right? This is a choke point for maritime trade routes, right? These are some things which would affect a lot of trade with respect to China. Eventually, logistics, if it increases, if the cost of logistics increase, then the final goods and services prices will also increase and affect trade at some point of time. So these three locations we see are the ones which are disputed, occupied by Iran but claimed by UAE. So firstly, what are the relations between China and Iran? So China and Iran have signed a strategic cooperation agreement. Now, within this, they have energy security, which means that China is importing a huge amount of crude oil from Iran. Crude oil from Iran. And this oil is quite cheaper than what is available in the markets. The second thing is about economy and Belt and Road Initiative integration. China also views Iran as a country which would get involved with its Belt and Road Initiative, and eventually the trade routes will lead to further reduction of prices of goods and services, right? And there has also been trade relations that has been established between China and Iran. China and Iran also have comprehensive strategic partnership. The goal here is to invest in technologies related to defense, renewable energy, and so on. This is with the sole purpose of boosting Iran's economy. We know the fact that there is CAATSA, that is countering American adversities through Sanctions Act, which means that America has put sanctions on some of the countries, including Iran. This means that US and its allies would not indulge into trade with Iran. This would lead to the drop in economic growth for Iran. And therefore, through this comprehensive strategic partnership, it enables China to do two things. One, it will have cheaper crude oil that is availed from Iran. It is the top customer of crude oil from Iran. And the second is, it would also counter the sanctions posed by America. It has already been doing so when it comes to Russia. Now, what is the Gulf Island dispute? So, Gulf Island dispute arose in 1971. 1971 was the time when British troops withdrew from these islands, that is from Greater Tun, Lesser Tun and Abu Musa. Now these were claimed by Emirates. Now this was claimed by Sharjah, and Greater and Lesser Tun was claimed by Ras Al Khaimah. Now later on, these emirates were to become a part of UAE, and therefore it also inherited the long-standing dispute between Iran and UAE. This is because in 1971 itself, when the British troops withdrew, Iran went on and occupied these regions, and therefore from then on the Gulf Island dispute has started and it is continuing. China has maintained its stance by saying that these territories rightfully belong to UAE and there should be peaceful conciliation of this territorial dispute, and it should be through consensus and dialogue. This is not something that Iran likes, and Iran has also thought of raising the Taiwan issue in retaliation. So this is the reason why the Chinese envoy was summoned. But even when he was summoned, the Chinese stance remains the same. So let us see what China is planning in this region. China has a multifaceted approach when it comes to this region of West Asia, right? First of all, there are economic interests. As we had seen, there is Strait of Hormuz. A huge amount of trade occurs through this choke point, and therefore it is very necessary that it should be secure, that there should not be any threat to the trade routes, right? There is economic interest involved, and then there is diplomatic balancing act. Strait of Hormuz, and as we had discussed earlier, there is crude oil available at a cheaper rate for China. Now it is not just the oil that it is buying, it is also balancing its act. There is diplomatic balancing when it comes to countering US by buying Iran's oil, right? That was through the CAATSA provision. Also, there is diplomatic balancing if we observe that with Iran, it has comprehensive strategic partnership. With respect to UAE, it supports its stance on the territories occupied by Iran. So it is balancing what it is doing in West Asia. There is also strategic objectives in the form of peacefulness within the region and stability within the region that needs to be achieved. It is also intended that through this strategic objective, it will have a long-term engagement and influence within the region, right? So this regional influence will also be something that is being targeted under this approach. So we can rightfully call this approach of China in this region as something which is multi-aligned. And rightfully so, because nobody would tie itself to something which is just one in nature. They would try to diversify their risk. And for that risk diversification, it would try to engage with the regional countries or the powers, right? So it would try to make happy both of these countries. So what are the implications for India? Let us see the strategic challenges that are there. One is we are also friends of Iran, right? We import crude oil from them. However, after the US sanctions, this import has reduced. However, we have Chabahar port, right? Chabahar port is something which was constructed as an alternative to Gwadar port, right? This provides us with a route to the Central Asian regions which are resources rich, right? However, with respect to China-Iran strategic partnership, this is something that may be ignored or overlooked, or something which would be set behind, right? Then there is diplomatic balancing that India needs to do for herself as well. First, with respect to Iran, we have shared some historical ties in the past, and it should be continued through dialogue. So this diplomatic positioning is the need of the hour as China ventures into this region. Then with respect to US, because it is also a partner and an ally for us, we would try to have certain amount of relations with Iran which may not upset this country, right? And China is something that is creating a lot of challenges for us, because a lot of our developmental projects are not to the tune of what China is investing in the region, right? So we have to counter all of this. There has to be a certain amount of diplomatic balancing that has to take place, right? And we also have to understand the geopolitical dynamics. Geopolitical dynamics meaning that how the territorial dispute pans out, and also who gets to influence this region within the long term, right? It is only going to happen through creating relations with all the stakeholders and ensuring that there is some amount of discussions that take place, right? So the implications for India are clear. What is with respect to China, what is with respect to Iran, and with respect to US and UAE. So these are the stakeholders within the region, and India would have to tread on this diplomatic stance very, very carefully, right? Elections in France. France will elect the new National Assembly in 2 rounds of polling, that is on June 30 and July 7th, right? Now this question has also been asked in your mains paper in 2022, and that is why this is included as an issue. So let us understand what it is about. There is a significance of this election. Why? Because it is something where the cohabitation will take place. Now let us understand what cohabitation means. Cohabitation is something where there is president and there is prime minister, but they do not belong to the same political party. But why should they belong to the same political party? Or rather, with respect to Indian Constitution, you may have the question, why should president be of some party at all? So this is because the current political regime is semi-presidential in nature, which means that president is elected through a popular vote, and he goes on to appoint the prime minister who holds the largest majority in the National Assembly, that is one of the houses of the parliament, or some with the coalition party. The president will also appoint the cabinet, right? Now the cabinet, which is appointed by the president, however it is appointed by the president, it does not matter. It is only responsible to the legislature, or rather National Assembly. Okay. So the existence of this dual executive, that is president and prime minister, is due to the semi-presidential nature of polity in France. So let us understand what is the current political regime of France. First, in 1958, there were multiple republic regimes. The present one was Fifth Republic. It is known by this name, and within this they have gone for semi-presidential form of polity. Let us try and revise what is presidential form of government and what is parliamentary form of government. Right? With respect to the presidential form of government, the president is elected through popular vote and he is independent of the legislature. Right? However, when we talk about the parliamentary system, the president is elected with, if we talk about Indian parliamentary system, he is elected through electoral college, right? And there is a prime minister who is appointed by the president as the leader of the house. Okay, so he is appointed, and there is also a council of ministers that are appointed on his recommendation, and they are collectively responsible to Lok Sabha, right? Semi-presidential is something which is having powers of executive of both president and prime minister. President is elected through popular vote, like the presidential system of government, and prime minister and the cabinet that is appointed is responsible to the house of the parliament, that is National Assembly. Right? So this is the combination that we have here. This is the reason it is called semi-presidential. Right? So this is the current political regime of France. Right? Now let us have a brief comparison with Indian Constitution. What are the provisions, since this was already asked in 2022. Right? So with respect to president, he is elected in India through electoral college. This electoral college consists of the elected members. Okay? While in France, the president is elected through popular vote. Okay? The tenure for both the president of India as well as France remains 5 years. Okay? Now, president is the one who gives assent to bills, promulgates ordinances, and so on. Right? While with respect to the French president, they would be mostly concerned about foreign policy, defense, and regulatory matters. Now, with respect to impeachment of the president, India it is done by the parliament, and here it is the same, right? The president can also dissolve in both the countries, in both the legislatures. President can dissolve the Lok Sabha in India, and here in France, president can dissolve the National Assembly as well, right? So this is the difference between the presidents of India and France. Prime Minister is appointed. This largely remains the same, appointed by the president. Here also it is appointed by the president. And this is based on the majority, leader of the house. And this is through majority in National Assembly, right? So this is the difference here. Parliament is again bicameral in nature for both of these. And this is how the comparison can be drawn between India and France, between the executives and the legislature, right? Moving on, we briefly touch upon the relations between India and France. So, there have been areas of cooperation and also there have been some challenges, right? So, what are the areas of cooperation that we have? One, there is a good amount of defense partnership. When it comes to aircrafts, the Rafale deal. This was also a question in your 2024 prelims. And with respect to submarines, these technologies have been given to India as well to secure its maritime borders. Scorpene class submarines. Right? Then there is economic cooperation. The trade amounts to nearly $13.4 billion between India and France. France has also been a supporter of India for UN Security Council membership. Then there is also climate cooperation that we have. We have the Paris Agreement in 2015 that was supported by India. And France has also supported India's initiatives like International Solar Alliance from 2015 onwards, right? There are some challenges. There is absence of free trade agreement with France, and this hinders the maximization of potential of trade between India and France. Then there are barriers to Indian products. So non-trade barriers like sanitary and phytosanitary measures are put by France for the products that arrive from India. And this has led to downfall in the goods that are exported, right? Then there are IPR concerns. France says that there are intellectual property rights that it would like India to respect for the French companies. But France has been saying that it is not up to the mark, and that is why French companies have ceased to come and do business with India, right? So these are some of the challenges, and these are the relations between India and France. Just Stop Oil activists vandalized Stonehenge. Now this is a topic from environmental governance, and it also shows environmental activism. What has happened is there is a monument in UK. This picture you must have seen as a background of your windows. There, what has happened, the Just Stop Oil activists have sprayed orange powder on this monument so that they can drive attention to the climate change issues. That is, they want fossil fuels to be completely flushed out till the year of 2030. So let us have a look at this issue. So firstly, what is Stonehenge. So this may be a question that can come in your prelims. Stonehenge is a prehistoric monument. Now, the purpose of constructing this monument is not known, but the year is somewhere estimated to be around 3000 to 2000 BCE. And later on, this circular arrangement of stones was used to practice rituals during summer and winter solstice. Right? So this is about the monument that has been affected. You can learn it as a prelims fact. Then, why was it vandalized? So as stated above, the Just Stop Oil activists, they are a group which believe that there must be some amount of civil resistance so that the governments notice the efforts that it has to take so that the climate change stops. That is, we must arrest the rising temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius and we have to act now. So through these measures, through these vandalizing of monuments, they intend to draw the attention. And they have also achieved success in some. For example, UK has said that they will not go for new projects in oil, gas, coal, right? And they are also, Just Stop Oil activists are also pushing for fossil fuel treaty by the year of 2030, where they propose that collectively everyone should stop consuming these harmful products that are bad for the health of the earth, right? Here, this theme can be utilized by understanding the environmental governance that has to take place and the things that are being pointed out by the climate activists. Firstly, what is environmental governance at global level, and then we will understand what is it at national level. Environmental governance would be something that is governed by three stakeholders, mainly state, which frames laws, rules and regulations, the market, the businesses, and the civil society organizations, right? So this is how the governance of environment will take place. When the state and the market may not be acting, then it becomes the role of civil society organizations to carry forward with the environmental concerns, right? Because they have to provide for the further generations that is about to come, right? So at global level, what are some of the global diplomatic levels of environmental governance? One would be United Nations Framework for Climate Change Convention. Then you have United Nations Convention on Biodiversity. So this is for your LMOs, safety of living modified organisms. Again, we have UNCCD, combating desertification. So UN Convention on Combating Desertification, this is to reduce the land degradation processes, right? This is for your climate change. That is to stabilize the greenhouse gas emissions that have taken place historically and further reduce or mitigate the impacts of the greenhouse gas that has led to the deterioration of climate. That is, it has led to increase in sea levels, increase in temperature. Okay. So these are collectively known as the Rio Conventions. Of course, it is not limited to this, but these are some of the major ones which are related to environmental governance, right? With respect to India, what has been done when it comes to environmental governance? We have National Action Plan for Climate Change. under which there are 8 missions. These 8 missions have been targeted so that we can mitigate the effects of climate change. In line with this Convention for Biodiversity, we have Biological Diversity Act of 2002 to conserve the genetic resources that is present within the forests or the vegetation. Then UNCCD, we have also set land degradation neutrality targets for ourselves, because we understand that soil is essential so that our crops are grown, and it would also enable the food security of India, and without which there would be a challenge at the governance level also. For example, we have National Food Security Act, right? So these are some of the environmental governance at the global and the national levels. Then this is something that I would like you to write in the comments also, that what are some of the environmental movements by non-state actors and whether they have been effectively able to influence the policy making at the global or the national level. So one example I would give you from India itself, Chipko movement, right? So this led to the change in policy which said that commercial felling of trees should be banned, right? In this, a group of women tightly hugged the trees that were about to be cut on the orders, right? And this movement led to this kind of a policy change. This influenced it, right? So can you give me some examples? I would just mention it. If you find time, you can write it in the comment box what these are about. Silent Valley movement, Narmada Bachao Andolan, and so on, right? So this is your homework. Now, environmental diplomacy and soft power. India is a country that has always pushed for environmental upgradation. It also has in place environmental impact assessment, which has been recently amended in 2020 as well. So how are we posing a soft power? How are we imposing it on the other nations? It is through our actions. One is the life movement, that is lifestyle and environment. What it pushes for is deliberative consumption, that is, you should be conscious of what you are consuming so that there is no wasteful expenditure or consumption of products, because ultimately it is the nature that has to pay, and then eventually it would be us or our future generations. So there should be responsible consumption. Then, with respect to our commitments to the climate change, we have INDCs, which we have already achieved before the target was set, before the targets were to be achieved, right? So we have already achieved 40% of renewable energy sources for our electricity production, right? And this has also made us to commit in our Panchamrit goals that we would have 500 gigawatts of fossil-free energy by 2030, and we are going to have net zero by the year of 2070. So this is something that would lead to environmental diplomacy and also imposing the soft power that India would have by finishing its commitment and over delivering. So this is about the just stop oil activists that have vandalized the Stonehenge monument. Indian diaspora in South Africa. Now, this topic has to be understood from the point of view of diaspora, Indian diaspora as a whole. Right? Now, as per the World Migration Report of 2022 that is published by United Nations, it is said that Indian diaspora is the highest in numbers. That is close to 1.79 crore of people reside in other countries, and those are the people who belong to India or have Indian origin. Right? We are talking about NRIs and overseas citizens of India. Right? So there is a huge amount of contribution that happens when it comes to Indian diaspora. One of the major things is remittances. Right? Close to 3 to 4% of GDP is something that is sent back to India as a form of remittance. Right? So what is important with respect to Indian diaspora is to also acknowledge the contributions that they have led to, and also the image of Indians in the various countries. So we do it by honoring their contributions. Right? So it is through various awards like Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Awards. Right? And within this figure, you would get to know where are the destinations that Indians would go to. That is where Indian diaspora is found the most. So, with respect to that report, that is World Migration Report, UAE, US and Saudi. These are the destinations with maximum amount of Indian diaspora. And within the Indian diaspora, one of the countries is South Africa. There, out of all, 6% of Indian diaspora would reside. Now, it is not without any historical ties that Indian diaspora has been settling there. Let us have a look. Firstly, why is it in news first? Because there was recently a number of people from Indian origin that were elected in South Africa, both at center as well as in the provincial legislatures. To name a few, there were 4 out of 87 parliament members from Democratic Alliance that were of Indian origin. There were the names of these member of parliaments: Mergan Chetty and Shara Singh. Now, the bigger thing that we need to discuss here is the history of Indian diaspora in South Africa. So in the 19th century, the British, what they did was they had indentured laborers transported from India to the sugarcane estates of Natal province in South Africa. Now, Natal is now known as KwaZulu-Natal, but at that point of time, when the process took place, this was during 1890s. So, this was Natal province, right? Now, indentured laborers were the ones who were a form of bonded labor, right? And they were promised that they would get a return trip to India, provided they serve their year end of contract. But it was so the case that this never happened, and they ended up being stranded on that area which was away from their homeland, right? They were subjected to multiple racial discrimination. A number of welfare programs was not something that was available to them, and they were treated almost like slaves, right? Then there was also role of Gandhiji. Gandhiji, who arrived in South Africa to practice as also, eventually he would practice as lawyer. He was also aghast by seeing how the racial discrimination was taking place. There was also within his tenure of being in South Africa, there was also something as disenfranchisement. That is, these indentured laborers had no right to vote. They had no right to vote who would represent them, right? So these were some things which were not acceptable to Gandhiji, and it was also the place where he learned his methods of non-violent resistance and the method of satyagraha. So this is quite important, and it was in 1915, 9th January, that Gandhiji returned to India from South Africa, and this is now celebrated as the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, right? This is because this day changed the freedom struggle, because it led to a new beginning for India. So, how did Indian diaspora start getting recognition there? So here you can see there has always been some amount of racial discrimination, and also through apartheid that continued from 1948 to 1990s. Even when it ended, it did not leave people against discrimination. There was always a constant discrimination that was going on, and people had to earn their way out of it so that some good things or welfare services would be made available to them. It was always divided like this. The map was divided like this. The racial concentrations of 30% or more by magisterial districts, right? So firstly, there was expansion in numbers. So nearly 3% of population of South Africa is consisting of Indians, right? So 1 million people, close to 1 million people would be there, and 80% of them are concentrated in KwaZulu-Natal province, right? KwaZulu-Natal province, that is on the coast, this side, right? Most of them are present here. That is where historically the indentured laborers were also present, right, in the Natal province. The second thing is they built on knowledge economy. That means that they have gone into various important professions like law, engineering, medicine, and therefore they have this knowledge economy that is built on the generations. Then they have a huge amount of representation, whether it is with respect to government, with respect to media houses, or any other industry. However, there are certain challenges that this Indian diaspora faces while in South Africa. There is complete economic struggle for a lot of people. 1 out of 4 people of Indian origin are below poverty line. This is one of the economic struggle, that is, they have to face poverty on a consistent, continuous basis. Then there is cultural marginalization. It is because of the historic essence of the place that westernization is treated to be superior, and Indian culture and heritage is something that is being ignored. Then there are violence and hate crimes that is racially motivated, right? So these are the challenges that Indian diaspora would face in South Africa, even in the present day. However, as the representation of members of parliament from Indian origin increases and their stronghold over the knowledge economy increases, with the diplomatic balancing that is required by the Indian government through various groupings like BRICS, G20, there should be some resolution to this issue so that human rights of even the Indians within this spaces is upheld.